Good morning or afternoon to all of our 100 subscribers. Holy crap. First, I would like to say, just real quick, thank you all so much for helping PDR reach this milestone. I mean, I remember this time last year, we were sitting at probably around like maybe 20 subs, but because of just the immense amount of support that we've gotten from the folks over on Twitter and other people on the channel, uh, it's just wow. Um, so I thought that as a nice treat, I decided to reach out to voice actors who've been a part of Darklands in one or so episodes, and I basically just asked, is there any questions you might have about the series going in? Um, Quickly, I'll just say there might be minor spoilers, but honestly, I can't really think of much that might be, that might get in the way of future storylines or might ruin future storylines. So, I guess just in case, I'll put a minor spoiler alert here. But otherwise, what I'm basically going to do is I am going to select two questions that these voice actors have asked me, and I have them all jumbled up in random order. I have not rehearsed any of this, obviously, so I can give this information as direct and as raw as possible. Um, you guys definitely deserve it. I mean, this has just been absolutely incredible. Just again, thank you. Thank you so much for 100 subs. All right, so let's get started with the Darklands voice actor Q&A. So starting off is a question from my buddy Balcazaurus that says, "Has the planet prospered after the collapse of modern civilization?" Yes. You do have plenty of places in the Darklands where nature has sort of reclaimed, towns and cities. Obviously, it depends on the populations there. You know, so like cities that have been long abandoned, yeah, they probably resemble something from The Last of Us or I Am Legend. Um, Now, as for fauna, that's a little different. Uh, you see, the fauna have been affected by the same contagion that creates fuglies. While these animals, which a lot of these creatures have different names depending on who's passing it down. Different colonies have different names for these creatures, but usually fugly animals tend to be more aggressive than their usual, than the normal cousins. Uh, and unfortunately, the further down in the generations they get, the more ferocious they get. Very similar to fuglies, the humanoids. So these animals, for example, like a deer, for example, might not be necessarily, aggressive going forward, but then it will have offspring, and then that offspring will have offspring. And that generation may be more willing to actually attack humans or attack anything in terms of, either it feels threatened or maybe it's just feeling aggressive. Uh, the catch is that the further down the line these these fugly creatures get, eventually it gets to a point where their DNA is so affected by whatever it is that creates fuglies that they cannot reproduce. So essentially, it's a good thing because that basically means that the wilderness isn't going to be ravaged by fugly animals, but it's the generation that leads up to that, the one that people are, colonists and Darklanders are waiting to die off. Those are the ones that people are afraid of. Um, and all right, going on to the next question. This one comes from Marcus Rothenburg. He asks, "How do you come up with your characters?" This is it's a pretty big question. It's kind of a lot of these characters come from either things that kind of like I get inspired by movies, shows, or video games, things that I think would actually make a really good, addition to the Darklands. Others are more based off of people that I knew from my own personal life. Uh, I won't go into too many details because I don't know if some people might look into some characters and go, "Hey, that's not right." But uh, I'll just say most of the people who are based off my real life, you know, friends and family, they're not ever in a degrading way. Um, but yeah, mostly from just things that I'm interested in. Like okay, here, like for example, I believe it was episode 4 that introduces Barnum and the Showman. This episode was written pretty soon after the people in my household got really into that movie, The Greatest Showman, with Hugh Jackman. The one that shows off P.T. Barnum in a musical. I know the movie didn't get very good reviews. I mean, for me, I'm more of a fan of the music than I am of the actual movie. But I thought it might be kind of fun to have marauders that are kind of fashioned around a circus or something like that, with their leader being named Barnum, named after P.T. Barnum. Uh, just little things like that. And there's little things like in the lore, for example, the House of Heroes movie trailer that I had in an earlier episode. That's clearly a mix of the MCU with characters from DC. You know, a nice little merge there between the two of them. Beyond Man is clearly meant to be Superman. Sanguine is similar to Batman. So on and so forth. Uh, So that basically answers that. All right, going on to Ariel Beesh. She asks, "Who is the most difficult character to write lines for?" Oh boy. Well, I would say that. That's a really good question. There is a character coming up in future episodes. I'm not gonna name them because I want them to be a surprise. But their dialogue is a little difficult to write because I have to make them likable, but also keep in mind that this person does have a darker backstory. This person does come from a more, I guess you could say, a jaded background than Jules. So they're not going to be necessarily forgiving as Jules, and they'll be more aggressive than Jules. So I kind of have to keep that balance, but if we're talking of like the original cast, I would actually say Quinn is pretty difficult to do because it's really hard. Because Quinn is the audience proxy, so it's hard to be able to write certain lines for him that don't just feel like "Hey Jules, could you give me a line of exposition, please?" It's just okay. So I have to find out a way to word this in a way that doesn't sound like, "All right, begin the exposition part of the episode." Um, but also, along with that, I also have to keep in mind that Quinn, although he is naive to the Darklands, he's not stupid. I might have made him a little dumber. I remember back in episode 2, he didn't know what the word keen meant. But, again, I would just chalk that up to, early writing and whatever. Um, Quinn coming off as a little dumber than he actually is, but, whatever. As of right now, Quinn may not be the brains of the two, but it is kind of like I have to keep this nice balance of making him naive, but not just dumb. Okay, Ariah Makhi asks, "Will there be a future episode that reveals more of Jules' backstory?" Yes, there will be. Episode 15 actually does delve pretty deep into Jules's background without revealing too much. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for that. In fact, I'm not gonna really go too deep into that episode or into that question because I want you guys to see the episode. All right, Ariel Beesh coming back with, "Who's the most fun to write for?" Uh, Actually, I would probably say Morgan and Gregor. I know Morgan especially. He's been in. They both have been in only 2 episodes, but there was just something really funny about the idea of Morgan essentially being kind of like the popular term these days. He's a boomer, but one who is, maybe a little naive to certain things. He's ignorant to how the Darklands may run in ways, but he keeps on that traditional style, and he has a good mindset of, if something doesn't attack me, why should I attack it? That kind of deal. But he's also still grumpy. He's seen the darker side of life, and he's come out smiling in the end. Gregor is similar in that he's just been beaten down by society, that he is a fuglier. He's never going to be truly accepted by the denizens of the Darklands. Colonists are going to always drive him away unless he has, help from Morgan. All he thinks about is the protection of his family, but he's not going to... I would say I wanted him to be, ironically, the lawful good character of the series. Because I thought it might just be funny that you have all of these characters in the series, but none of them could really be described as, like, pure good, while Gregor does things not because he wants a reward, but because he knows it's the right thing to do. I guess you could say that's more neutral good, but basically what I'm trying to say is I wanted Gregor to come off as the good Samaritan of the Darklands, and it's ironic because he is a fuglier. But I would say maybe other than that, I do have some fun writing for Jules. Obviously, it depends on the environment he is in, but I tend to have a lot of fun when Jules is interacting with people that he knows. There's that nice little banter that he does. I feel like Jules is charismatic of a character to where a lot of conversations he has can just kind of flow naturally. All right, moving on to my buddy Gamma. He asks, if you could spotlight a character in a commercial, who would it be? Definitely Quinn. Quinn, I guess you could say he's sort of the unofficial mascot for Darklands. This is just coming from me, just because I feel like Quinn represents the aspect of Darklands that I feel like make it the most unique, or at least as different compared to other post-apocalyptic worlds, because you have this bleak, apocalyptic wasteland. There's no light. There's marauders. There's mutants. There's all these things that are out there trying to kill you. And then you have this friendly talking rabbit whose only purpose right now seems to be survival and finding a rabbit that he can... finding a mate I can call my own. So there's just something really intriguing. I mean, Quinn is definitely... he's definitely the one I would want to push. I think he is the most memorable character of the series, in my opinion, at least. All right, and then Ariah Makhi, again, she asks, where in the world does the Darklands story take place? So, seasons 1 and 2 currently take place in the Pacific Northwest. So, right now, the entirety of seasons 1 and 2, or at least the first bits of season 2, they do take place in California, or at least the California territory. That is why it's called the Republic. I do plan to explore the rest of the United States. Now, the history of Darklands does have there's some major changes to the timeline. It's an alternate history scenario that I'll get into later. But yeah, right now the series takes place specifically in the Republic, in the California territory. All right. Todd Dave, he asks, if you could cast a live action streaming service, who would be your choices? Oh boy. Okay, this is actually this is a question I was actually really hoping someone would ask. Let's see. For Jules, now I know I have a little image of him below, but I always thought that Tom Paine He's an actor who was in a show called Prodigal Son. I always thought he would do a really good job as Jules McCaffrey. Um, as for Quinn, this one was interesting. Um, Either I would personally would love to come back and voice Quinn because I feel his voice is definitely the most unique of I think of my my vocal arsenal. I guess I don't know. Um, but if say if the people I'm streaming or that's streaming it go no we need someone. I would actually like E.G. Daily to play Quinn. She played the voice of Tommy Pickles in Rugrats. Because that is kind of the inspiration I had for Quinn's voice. So if I can't play Quinn, I would love for her to come and play him. Draymond, Draymond would be. I honestly would see Liam O'Brien of Critical Role playing a really good version. I wouldn't want him to use a voice like War and Darksiders. I would think kind of just his normal speaking voice, like what he would did, what he did in Fallout New Vegas. Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter. That kind of thing. Let's see, Morgan Stoltz. Personally, I would love for that old man to be played by Keith David. I always just thought Keith David was the kind of guy that I would love to see in the role of a post-apocalyptic old badass. Um, let's see. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of gargoyles. I mean, my two bearded dragons. They're named after Goliath and Demona. So clearly, my admiration for this man goes, so far. All right. So what about Morgan's buddy Gregor? Gregor the Freak. Um, okay, so I would want Gregor to be played by someone who can do a monstrous voice, but not somebody that a lot of people would expect. Um, oh, okay. Actually, I can see Terrence C. Carson, the original voice for Kratos in the God of War series. I can definitely see him playing Gregor. He has that kind of bestial, almost savage sounding voice whenever he plays Kratos, especially in God of War 3. I think he would actually be really good as Gregor. You know, maybe he would just like we would have him like put something in his mouth to give him more of a almost like his mouth is full, or however Balcazaurus did the voice. All right, John of Embers, the one of the I would say he's probably the first main. I think yeah, he's the first main antagonist of the series. John of Embers, I would want him to be played by somebody who, because I never imagined John as being like a big burly guy. I'm not looking for somebody akin to say like Jason Momoa or Travis Willingham. I would think someone like Bill Skarsgård would make a very good John of Embers, because he is skinny, he's a little lanky, but he can pull off a creepy, sinister role. So I think he would actually be really good, and also, given his acting resume, he's also really good at character acting. So I think that would be actually pretty spot on for him. Pox, okay, this is going to be hard for me to say because Mr. Creepypasta does so good as Pox. But if I had the ability to cast, with some money behind it, uh, I can honestly see one of two people playing Pox. First would be Tom Kenny, which everybody will know so well. Obviously, he's done, a lot of voices, including one character. I can't remember his name on top of my head, but I want to see Tom Kenny play a role of a, not a psychopathic, psychopathic bot, but definitely a conniving, murderous, scheming machine. I feel like Tom Kenny would be so good in that role. I mean, I look at his vocal work for Mr. Miss the Jelly Bean. in Rick and Morty. So we know he can pull off something creepy and something disturbing. So I think he'd be good as Pox. If I want to go for something more crazy and somewhat zany, to especially if I'm getting, especially if I have Liam O'Brien playing Draymond, I would probably get Richard Stephen Horwitz to play Pox. The original, the voice actor for Billy in The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, the voice of Raz and Psychonauts, the voice of what's his name, Moxie in Hell of a Boss. Yeah, I could definitely see him playing Pox. If only if I'm going for like crazy and I would even want him to do the Billy voice. Oh yeah, and Invader Zim, so no one bites my head off. He did play Invader Zim, but I wouldn't want him to use the Zim voice, just because I feel like Pox could scheme circles around Zim if need be. But yeah, I would still love for him to use the Billy voice for him. All right, going down the cast. If we're talking about all of the antagonists, Alan Lewis from Carol. Uh, well, okay. So Alan would have to be played by somebody who definitely has a sort of authoritative approach to things. He's well spoken. He has a strong personality, but someone who could also pull off something like, scheming. Like someone who could flip flop between two completely different mannerisms. Off the very top of my head, I think that Michael Biehn, who played Kyle Reese in the first Terminator film, could see him doing it, if only because I really like the actor. I know that he can, he's been able to pull off some pretty good stuff in the past. I loved him in Terminator. I loved him in Tombstone. I loved him in Aliens. So I know that he can definitely come off as a nice guy, but he can still kick ass if need be. So I think that he would be good for the role. Either him or Chris Sarandon, the guy who played Jerry Dandridge, I think that's how you say his name, in the first Fright Night, and obviously Jack Skellington, the speaking voice for him in Nightmare Before Christmas. Because again, I think that if he can pull off like what he did in Fright Night, where Jerry could, in one scene he's very charismatic, he's very friendly to people, but the moment that he's given a position of power, the moment he sees an opportunity, to grasp what he wants, he turns into someone completely more sinister, someone much more evil. I think that actually Alan Lewis would be really good if played by Chris Sarandon as well. And finally, this is a character that's only been mentioned in terms of pronouns. He's been referred to simply as he, and I believe it was only in a specific part from Pox. So I call this guy the BBEG, or the Big Bad Evil Guy. I'm not going to reveal who he is, because this is definitely a huge spoiler alert. Or that would be a huge spoiler. But if I had the money, if I had the authority, I would cast Charles Dance as the big bad villain. Charles Dance, I feel like he's just able to pull off charismatic villains so damn well. I mean, for example, Tywin Lannister in Game of Thrones was such a bastard, but there were just scenes with him you couldn't help but just smile and actually kind of acknowledge just how brilliant he was. And obviously, he played Jonah in Godzilla King of the Monsters, another villain who just absolutely dominated the screen wherever he was. Charles Dance just has that voice, that kind of, tempo that just, damn, I just love it all so damn much. So definitely Charles Dance. Okay, so that is that would be how I would cast a live action streaming series. Fingers crossed, right? All right. Moving on to the next question. Shakyra Dunn. She asks, Would you ever want to cross your story into other universes? Um, if this is asking if I'm ever going to do crossovers with my other stories, absolutely. I do have some plans in the works. People who follow me on Twitter might remember a tweet I made where I kind of teased a an impromptu Darklands Misfits crossover event. I don't know when exactly I'll do that, but because right now my season 2 plans are pretty stacked as it is. But right now, the only show I can really have issues crossing over with right now is Starship Phil. But I mean, we never know. We'll see. I know whenever Balcazaurus and I finish up on Jackalope, that would also be a great potential spinoff right there. Um, all right, and then my good friend Dodge This 42, she asks, "What was your inspiration for the world itself?" This is a great question because I actually remember this very well. Bypassing the fact that I've been basically working on at least the universe of Darklands for the better part of a decade. I would actually a little longer than that. I would say probably around like 15 years I've been working on this thing. Damn. Man, I feel old. Anyways, uh but for the actual final Darklands universe, uh this was back when I was living in Santa Cruz County. Uh this is, for those who don't know, this is definitely a place where when it rains, it definitely rains. And the town where I lived in had this little valley where my neighborhood was, and there were just times where if a big enough storm came around, boom, there went the power. And I remember just sitting in my room, like I think I was either watching TV or I think I was playing. Fittingly enough, I think I was actually playing Fallout 3 when suddenly, blip, the power went out. I look outside, the entire street pitch black. There's not a light anywhere. And I just thought to myself, what if the lights never came back on? And just the realization of what I said just came tumbling back. Imagine how many fortunes are just suddenly gone. How much work people put into certain projects gone. If that thing isn't backed up on paper or some other object, it's gone. Like, holy crap, just my mind just started spinning with possibilities, and that actually ended up being the basis of Darklands. Just a simple blackout and one single thought. I know that's how a lot of these things happen, but that's how mine happened. And I just thought that is actually pretty chilling, the thought process of that. Okay. Going down the list. Gamma, once again, he asks, what would your ideal or perfect cast for an episode consist of? This is kind of tricky just because whenever I do guest stars, I like to at least keep it to, one per episode. I don't want to ever feel like whenever I advertise one person is in a video, I don't want it glossing over someone else. So this is actually kind of difficult for me to say because especially, I guess it all depends on what episode it is. If it was, for example, okay, like here's some ideas. If it was a character, like one of the librarians, that's a faction that's going to come up pretty quickly here in the series. A group that is dedicated to preserving lore and stuff like that. Maybe Jules finds something from the world before and he needs to get some information, so he goes to a local librarian chapter in order to get some clue or get some lead on where he's going. The informant that he talks to, I think it would actually be really cool if they were voiced by Oxhorn. Oxhorn does a lot of Fallout, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, 76, New Vegas. He does a lot of lore for those series. I mean, I've been watching his videos for years now, and I always thought his voice just had a very, a natural friendliness to it, and I thought it would actually be really cool if he got to play a learned character like that. Or let's say have an episode where Jules he's at a scrapper colony. They're called scrap yards. And there he meets an old friend of his, a fellow scrapper. Um, I can see this person being played by someone who's a bit like, someone very friendly, someone with a very, positive sounding voice. Like maybe Nitro Rad would be cool to have, or Saber Spark, Phantom Strider maybe. Like one of those three actually, I think would be really cool if they played an actual scrapper. That'd be cool. Or even Ant Dude, I could see that too. What else? If I okay, say there's an episode where Jules meets a group of marauders, and maybe these guys are tied in with some kind of demonic or some kind of horrific religion or something. It'd actually be really funny to me if one or two of these characters were voiced by, you know, voice actors from the Has Been Hotel cast. I don't know. I just thought that'd be actually really, really funny, really fitting. Uh, and let's see. Or let's say Jules has to go into a shop to sell some of his scrap. And he has a bunch of nerdy things with him. Maybe he has comic books, video games, movies, or stuff like that. He goes up to the counter, and boom, the vendor, the guy who he trades with, is voiced by Mac McMuscles. I, I I don't know. It's just just the idea of that just has me laughing because that's just so perfect. Like that would be my ideal or perfect cast for episodes like that. Like that's what I would go for. All right, and here's another question from Shakyra Dunn. What plans do you have for the future of your project? Uh, I do plan on Jules getting out of the Republic and moving out into the States. Uh, I've hinted at a few times throughout the series, especially during if people pay attention to the commercial segments, that this is a different history. So the United States is not exactly what we think it is. So the states I think, would be a big surprise to a lot of people. Thankfully, I do have some plans in real life where I will be going, outside of California, and I look forward to documenting my experiences and getting some inspiration for future episodes. Uh, I just know that season 2 will have Jules leaving the California territory and moving more north towards the Oregon territory. Uh, I guess not like real major spoilers there, but hey, there you go. All right, and moving on to the next question. Oh, okay, perfect. Balcazaurus asks, "What is the state of the United States in the world before / the Darklands?" Uh, in the world before, so this is a universe where California successfully seceded from the Union. The United States devolved into a totalitarian regime. In the world before, they were very much focused on basically plundering whatever resources that the country had in order to fill the pockets of its tyrannical overlords and, making the chancellor happy. So the United States, although strong in its own right, it is still considered a backwater country to a lot of other nations. Uh, and definitely the country definitely developed a mentality of it's us versus them, and yes, us US versus them. Because in this timeline, there's not a whole lot of allies coming to the United States aid in this. I won't go much further into that because, again, I kind of would like that to be, fleshed out a little bit more naturally in the series. But hey, there you go. That's a little tidbit for you guys, a little bonus for helping me get to 100 subs. You guys are amazing. As for the Darklands, I'm not gonna bring it up here because, again, I do have plans for Jules to leave the Republic and go out into the States. And so I feel like seeing the states and the Darklands might actually be a great way to, see for yourself, what the state they're in. And let's see. Dodge This 42. She asks, "What was your inspiration for your main characters?" Oh gosh, this is a big one. Okay, so let's take a trip back in time, shall we? Way back, 15 years ago, when I was first starting on Darklands. Back then, it was a book that I was trying to write called Colt and Gatling. It was about two bounty hunter brothers in a post-nuclear apocalyptic wasteland who basically every book I had in mind for them was them hunting down and bagging a new bounty. Uh, Jules is inspired by Colt. Colt was kind of Gatling was the bigger brother. He had, a lot more brawn to him, while Colt was more lithe. He preferred, you know, keeping things at a distance. He had the sniper, the snipper whiffle, and and little things like that. He actually didn't really prefer much combat. He tried to be more suave, charismatic. Talk his enemies into laying down their arms before they go in. Cannons blazing. Um, Now, Colton Gatling went through several rewrites. Then I changed it to where I decided first I changed Colt into a woman, and then eventually I got rid of them being siblings, and I decided to have them be lovers. But then that didn't feel right, so eventually I dissolved the lovers and I turned them into rivals, with the book being about Colt and Gatling going after the same target and them kind of trying to sabotage each other while they're hunting this person. Uh, but again, Colt's general personality never really changed much. Uh, I would say a lot of Colt's personality did kind of get through to Jules as a final character. Then there's a period of when I was first working on Darklands, as a series. I had a few scripts back when the series was just simply called Darklands. This character, I'm going to call him Jewel Zero, or I'll just call him Zero for short. Zero was very different from how Jules is now. He was a guy who it was implied that he was lonely, and the whole series would have been about would have had would have just followed a series of recordings that Zero did, speaking into a recorder, documenting his travels in the Darklands, and the whole premise of the story was going to be that, unfortunately, Zero wasn't a very reliable narrator, because there were some hints that he was crazy, and even most is, or even more is, even most, Jesus, but even more was when he got mad, he flew into this murderous rage where he just cut apart his enemies. Again, this is all behind, it's kind of like it's meant to imply that he did all these things. If this series kind of sounds boring, well, that's why I hit the hard reboot button on the series, and Zero turned into Jules, where I gave him a lot more personality and drastically toned down, one, his loneliness, and two, his craziness. And then finally, the actual name Jules McCaffrey came from a tabletop game that I played back when with my old group, called All Flesh Must Be Eaten. It was a zombie apocalypse survival game where you played survivors banding together to try and survive the zombie apocalypse. My character was named Jules McCaffrey. His thing was he had a crowbar, which I was very liberal with, bashing in zombie brains or prying things open, bashing things down, whatever it needed to do. But this interpretation of Jules was a lot more intense. Here's a guy who, if he was wronged by, say, a marauder, he'd break that marauder's kneecaps and leave him crawling on the ground, letting his screams attract nearby zombies so they would, flock to where this guy is and eat him while Jules could escape. That kind of deal. So these three characters just kind of all, came together to form the Darklands Jules McCaffrey. And then obviously I put a little bit of my own life and experiences and maybe a little bit more of my personality into him to kind of like fill in whatever gaps there were in his character. Quinn has a much shorter story. I know you're probably waiting for me to say, "Why he is originally based off Gatling." Actually, no. So Quinn was started off as a character in, I guess you could say, Darklands 1.0. I say this because there was a few scripts that I wrote where Jules was portrayed as a lot more dapper, a lot more, come Quinn, we must save the day, very very bravado, very arrogant. And Quinn was originally named Quivering Quinn. He was a Gary Gilder who was sent to spy on Jules because the whole joke about Jules' character in this is that he had this great legend behind them, kind of like Seth in the final series, where he was a hero of the people. He did, he bested all these great monsters and he defeated all these enemies, and the guild wanted to know exactly what his deal was, just in case he ever became a threat. And the joke was going to be, Jules wasn't, although he was skilled and competent, in his own unique way. Actually, a lot of his victories came from just sheer dumb luck, and but he had so much trust and so much faith in Quinn that it was meant to be kind of like a season one conflict where Quinn had to figure out what was more important, his loyalty to the guild or his friendship with Jules. Eventually, though, the problem was well, Quivering Quinn kind of had one note in that he was essentially a lesser version of Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, where, you know, Jules would rush into a situation and Quinn would just be like, "Oh, geez, oh, gee, Rick, I don't know if we should do that." I know that's Morty, but that's the general basis. Uh, so yeah, Quivering Quinn just didn't come. He came off as more annoying than anything. So when I hit the hard reboot again, basically dissolving Zero and then finally Jules and Quivering Quinn story, and then doing Darklands of the World before, I decided that Quinn had to be something different. He couldn't just be an ordinary guy because there are so many things out there where you have the duo, oh boy golly, we're just complete opposites, but we can't live without the other. Gee whiz. And I also wanted Quinn to be the audience proxy. And it's hard to be an audience proxy if you're somebody who's either been born in the Darklands, either as a colonist, or if it's somebody who's, the original character, he's a Gary Gilder. So it's weird that this guy doesn't really know much about the Darklands. It just didn't make a lot of sense. So, off the top of my head, I decided, you know what? What if he was a talking animal? Something to greatly emphasize, if Jules was meant to represent the darker, more, serious tones of the Darklands, well, Quinn should be the zany eccentricity of the same place. To show that this is a place where things can be serious, but also a place where things can just be crazy and ridiculous. And this is where Quinn's biggest inspiration comes from. Monio, or Chub, as Balcazaurus calls him. Monio is his pet rabbit, a adorable little gray bunny, and it just kind of sprung to my mind of this idea of a talking rabbit. It's different. I've never heard of a talking rabbit being in a post-apocalyptic universe. It's definitely strange, but that's exactly the point, though. It's so out there, it's so strange that it's memorable. So, Quivering Quinn became Quinn the Clever. Okay, moving on. Todd Dave asks, what would you say is the most unique aspect of the world you've created? Now, I know that blackout apocalypses aren't necessarily, completely original. I know that show Revolution did something similar. But I think it's the mix of the apocalypse, but also you couple that with uh, the alternate history zaniness, I guess, or the insanity that comes from the scenario that makes it very different. I mean, the I've never ever seen a universe quite like Darklands. The closest thing that comes close, obviously, is Fallout, which I have not been shy about stating it has been the primary inspiration for the Darklands. But what I've always thought was the most unique aspect is just the mix of the alternate history scenario, coupled with the unique apocalypse, and then plus just the setting itself with these, the different creatures. You have the Fuglies, then you have Quinn, you have bots. This is just, kind of elements that come from different apocalypses. Like the bots, you could say, were definitely, but there was definitely some inspiration from Terminator there. Maybe not quite Terminator, because they're not killing everybody, but then you have Fuglies, which, obviously those can be seen as zombies in other forms of media. Uh, so yeah, and finally we go to the last question. Marcus Rothenberg, last but not least, he asks, do you draw inspiration from existing fiction, real life, or both? Yeah, definitely both. I hate to say it, but yeah, I feel like my personal real life just really isn't all that exciting. I do, like I said in a previous question, I do use inspiration from people that I knew in real life to, make certain characters. Or, sometimes I'll even take characters or ideas from past stories and I will include them in Darklands. Like, for example, I wrote and directed a really cheesy and cringy movie back in college called Alan Lewis, which was a reimagining of Alice in Wonderland, but took place on a college campus. I know, absolutely riveting. And the characters from Carol, Alan Lewis, Jerry Walker, Chester Nico, Helga, what's her name? Katie Pearl. All of those people, Matt Hernandez, all of them are all inspired, or either based or just directly transported from that script into the show. Which, I mean, granted, Helga was a very different person. I think that Matt Hernandez might actually be. Matt Hernandez and Chester might be the closest they were to their original counterparts, but or at least their original renditions. But I try not to borrow too heavily from fiction, just because I don't want eventually someone to go think that something isn't original. I mean, it's hard to say anything is original these days, but I try to steer as close as possible to my own, to as fresh of ideas as possible. Things that, it's kind of like the CEO of Legendary Studios. When I see something or I get an idea for something, I put it in Darklands, or I put it out there because I personally, as a person, want to see that out there. I want to see a show about a scrapper, a guy who scrounges through the ruins of the world before looking for good loot and good treasure, teaming up with a talking rabbit with crazy brain mind powers, that kind of deal. I want to see a video, or I want to see a piece of media where a grizzled old man from the post-apocalypse teams up with a talking mutant to save the children of his colony from a group of marauders. That sort of thing. So that's where actually I've reached the end of my list, I believe. Um, Obviously, I do plan on doing more of these Q&As, including ones for eventually for Misfits and Starship Phil, when those series have been a little bit more, have been a little bit more fleshed out. I mean, heck, even Starship Phil, I don't even think episode 1 is out yet. So, well, I just dated this video. Well, I mean, I guess the 100 sub thing automatically dated the video, but whatever, it doesn't matter. But again, I hope those answers were satisfactory. Um, I always thought I kind of wanted to bring out some aspects of Darklands a bit more organically, but you know what? You guys have all been so amazing with your just endless support, and just you give us so much love and so much just everything. The energy that you guys put into a series like Darklands, it's just phenomenal. I never thought that there would be people out there who would care about a series that I made so much, you know. Or I look at people who watch Misfits. I saw comments where someone said that he was inspired to adapt his own D&D adventures into a similar story. That kind of thing just absolutely blows me away, and I'm just so damn happy that there are people out there who love what we do and are inspired by what we do. I mean, this whole channel just began with me wanting a platform to tell stories or speak my mind. I would never have imagined the community we would end up garnering as time went on. And I just want to say I am thankful for each and every one of you who subscribe to this channel. And I promise that we'll be giving you plenty of content in the future, come hell or high water. Again, all of you guys, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so, so much. I'll see you all next time.